Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahin and I'm joined by my co-hosts Summer and Naureen. And on today's show we welcome Megan Wyatt, or Coach Megan Wyatt, as I pulled off her Facebook page, who is a speaker, trainer, coach, author, and entrepreneur, passionate about helping others find, experience, love, purpose, and personal development. And the first question I've got to ask you, I saw your biography, and you said you're from Columbus, Ohio?
That's correct.
Nope.
I mean, a suburb of Columbus, but yeah.
Which one?
Westerville?
I'm from Dublin.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So I was like, I'm glad we got that on the show. Did you go to college in Ohio?
I did. I'm a Buckeye.
No kidding. What year?
I don't remember. When did I graduate? 2001.
Okay, so you're a few years before my time. I was the MSA president my year.
Okay.
In 05 and 06. I graduated
that tells us a lot about the Muslim community.
Yeah,
in Ohio.
I graduated in 07 actually, but I spent 8 years in college.
Mashallah.
Between
I
work.
converted to Islam when I was 19, and it was at campus. It was at Ohio State. First
Through the
time
dawah
ever-
tables.
No, but
No?
it was the first time I'd ever met Muslims in my life was actually in college. This is all pre 9/11 days and stuff, you know? So-
Right. I want to say Nurgle Dada made the MSA president back then or something. I don't even remember. He's an old friend of mine. He's runs a masjid now in Columbus. But so starting off, like I'm foaming at the mouth because I heard you were affiliated with some life coaching institutions back in the day, and you're a coach now.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about like why coaching is important for Muslims, I assume you coach mainly women.
No, I coach men as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a little bit about like what do you think benefits us from that angle?
Well, so pretty much my story is that I fell into personal development, didn't even know. I mean, this may sound really bad, but I didn't know this whole concept even really existed. Like, never heard of like Tony Robbins and all these other really popular people. And so way back when, Discover You with like Muhammad Sharif started this organization where he was going to be teaching people about life coaching. And I actually went to that event literally on a whim because at that time, he was one of my favorite teachers. I was like, oh, cool. Muhammad Sharif's teaching it. Why wouldn't I go? Right. So that was actually, I got there and it was amazing. He had everybody stand up when they arrived and say, well, like, what did you come for? And our plane was late. We walked in the room and he's like, hey, everyone, tell everybody why you're here. And I'm like, and I actually didn't know. The truth was I was so curious about what was happening. So even this whole like coaching industry, all this stuff was brand new to me at that time. But turns out that kind of led me to where I'm at now, where it was a modality of learning and growing and discovery that just really suited my personality. It really meshed with me as a person, really opened my eyes. And then from there, I just kind of kept going with different training programs, different experience, and that's kind of where I am today. So the way I look at it is I think like as Muslims, right, we talk about things like tazkiyah, right, purification and knowing yourself and being able to understand your nafs, all these things we have within Islam, right? I look at it as a version of the things that we're supposed to be doing as Muslims in one capacity or another. Some people are more inspired, I guess, for lack of a better term, from kind of a traditional way of doing that. For me, this just happened to be the thing that really helped me know myself the most, really changed me on a spiritual level and a personal level. And then I've just taken that modality, learned from other people and other trainers and teachers since then. But, that Islamic filter is obviously in everything that I do with everyone that I work with.
This would have been like around 2007 probably when you got started, you think?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've been coached. So let me ask you a question a little bit more about how you started and kind of my own experience. So I've always been the type that whenever there's a new initiative, I'll try it out for a little bit. So a couple of my friends, they went up to Toronto. I think it was when the class was being offered. And they spent a week up there, got trained. One guy, he reached out to me. He was like, he offered it to me as a free service for one session. And he's like, what'd you think? I'm like, that sounds okay. But like at the time I was like, I want to memorize the Quran. And then, but the thing is, he's like, he hadn't memorized the Quran. So I'm like, how can you help me? He's like, well, I can teach you the methodology of goal setting and massive action plans and all that jazz, right? So I'm like, all right, I'll try it out for a few months. I'll see like where I'm at. But it was $297 a month. And at the time I was single and I was like, you know what? I had disposable income. I was like, sure, whatever. Try it out. I didn't like, at the end of the day, my experience was the part that I was, and then later I had other friends like a year later go to the class and they'd hit me up. I had a friend who was like still in college. He was dragging his graduation out. I'm like, bro, you didn't even graduate college yet. What are you going to tell me? And he's like, yeah, but I learned all this stuff. I'm like, I don't care. Just because your dad was rich enough to send you for a $2,000 course for a week, right, doesn't mean you're Tony Robbins, right? Because I was familiar with these folks like Tony Robbins or Grant Cardone, etc. So, I had a problem looking back. Like it was like, cause there's a lot of nuance when people have specific goals. Let's say, for example, you go up to the course and you reach out to a friend and your friend is like, I need to lose weight. Right. And you yourself, let's say you're morbidly obese, but you took the course. You'd be like, well, I can still teach you. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. And I felt like I found like a lot of people who went for the certifications, they themselves were like losers. Let's just put it out there.
Ouch.
Now, I'm not saying you've obviously done it for a while now, but like, I don't know back when you started, what was your credibility besides going to a 1-week course?
So here's the thing. So obviously I can't defend or justify how a particular organization has chosen to do things. Okay. So that's beyond my control.
Sure.
Not a representation of any organization or anything. But I would say there's a couple pieces to your story which are really, really important because, everybody has to start out somewhere. That's one thing, right? No matter what training you do in life, everybody's got to have their first client, their first class, their first whatever that they're going to begin with. And there's going to be different modalities for that. Some people have someone overlooking their shoulder. Other people's are kind of flying solo. It just really depends on the different industries. There's a couple pieces to what you said, which is really important. First of all, coaching's not for everybody. That's one thing. First of all, it's not therapy. It's not for someone that's coming with, really severely struggling with mental illnesses and things like that. Those things have to be handled really carefully and need to go to someone who's a qualified expert. Things like what you mentioned, for example, like the Quran, right? You may or may not have been the right person for that. Either the person you were with, the chemistry was off, you didn't jive as people, or, you might not actually have done your assignments too, right? It would have to depend, right? Because I've never memorized the Quran, for example. That's not something I've done. But I have, alhamdulillah, had so many clients in the past that was their goals and they continue to finish things working with me. So I don't necessarily have to have the same experience. So on the one hand, it is about tools and techniques. It's about sitting down and being like, what do you want? What do you need to get there? And me helping someone figure out what's on the other side of that door. What's what's preventing you from going through that door? Now, some people are going to be better at this than others. Right? But so on the one hand, you don't have to have the same success at something to help someone because coaching is about what do you need and what do you want? Let me help you with the tools. What you're describing almost sounds more like mentorship within a specific thing. So I'm not going to go to someone, like you said, let's say someone who's, physical fitness isn't their thing and ask them advice on what's the best way to shape up my biceps or something, right? That's not correct. But if you go to someone and you say hey, I really want to get in shape and I'm dragging my feet, I'm not making it to the gym, and a coach that's passionate about what they're doing and they understand people and they can connect, they're still going to be able to sit down and be like, okay, great. So what do you want? Okay, I want to get in shape. Great. What kind of shape? I want to lose 15 pounds. Okay, awesome. What do you need to do to get there? And we're just going to go through and lay it out. It's your plan, not theirs.
Right.
And so that's part of, I think, a really important distinction for people in general. That being said, integrity is really important. People should never sell something that they themselves have not accomplished. So there is, I think, a line of integrity in what people are doing, in regards to how they advertise their services or what they say they can help you accomplish.
I think, I had the same kind of skepticism with life coaching as well. But at the same time, whenever you take a few steps back and you're like, well, wait a second, just thinking about the word coaching initially, I would think of sports teams, right? Mm-hmm. And look at the coaches for football teams or basketball teams or whatever. Those guys are not 6 feet tall and can shoot 3-pointers from across half court, but they coach the guys that do. Right. And it still matters who the coach is for that team to be successful, doesn't it? So I think there's a lot of validity to that, the coaching is in the tips and the techniques and understanding how to get that person to the other side of whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. So It's not necessarily about, oh, I've already won championships, now I can teach you how to do it, right? But Michael Jordan's team is apparently not that great. So it doesn't necessarily mean just because I've done it, I can help you do it, and vice versa. Right?
Sure.
That's a good point. Have you ever studied athletic coaches as far as your own training or just personal development?
No, I mean, not formally. I mean, I love listening to Success Magazine interviews with famous coaches of the past and stuff like that. They've got some great podcasts where they'll interview famous coaches and things like that, race car drivers. I mean, you can tell it's not my expertise, sports, but yeah, I mean, but it is a great analogy. And I think it works. And on the other side of that is you can have people who are exceptionally trained and skilled and still be terrible at working with other people.
Sure.
So I really feel like the responsibility comes on the person themselves when you're looking out, for help. Don't be afraid to be like, this didn't work for me. Don't be afraid to be like, hey, we're not a good mesh, or you're not meeting my needs.
Right.
This isn't going to work
out.
No,
I believe in the concept, right?
Yeah.
It just but certain organizations at the time, and maybe to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? Back then, you're a pilot, organization. It's a pilot project.
I will tell you something about that, though. This unnamed organization. That 1 week that I spent with them, to this day, I still think was some of the most solid training I'd actually ever gotten in this field. Now, that's pretty profound. Now, after all these years of coaching people, working with people, going to different organizations, getting different certifications, I still found that actually what I experienced was so solid and excellent. What I think is the downfall, it's kind of like, like I'm a convert to Islam, or when someone becomes religious and then they're like the convert zealous crazy. You're like crazy. You're like, what's stopping you from, stepping your life up? And they're like all excited and they have all this enthusiasm. And like, man, you don't have great goals. Let me help you. They're just like so infused with like the passion, the excitement that they don't know how to simmer down and actually connect with people. They're so into themselves and selling you something that inspired them that they're not really able to connect with you as a person. So I do think that also happened with people. They got so excited because their experience was so awesome and they wanted to share it with other people, but they hadn't processed, perhaps some individuals hadn't processed enough what they had learned. And they may have to do with maturity, and again, personality and temperament. I can't take credit for anyone else's stuff.
No, it actually reminds me, it's like, because sometimes the people I used to do Amway. You familiar with Amway?
Oh my God.
Back in like college, and you go to these conventions, but I talk to my friends about it. They're like, it's a scam. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't experience Free Enterprise Day, and like,
nacho chips and the cheese. I got invited to a meeting once, and like the nacho chips and the cheese. Everyone's like buying. You get you order your own toilet paper and paper towels to the house, and you make money. Yeah. I mean, I remember the whole system.
Yeah, but like, it reminds me of Muhammad Sharif. Some of his visionary videos. It's like Assalamu alaikum, right? That's super enthusiastic. And most people though are like, yeah, what's wrong with this dude? So
it sounds like you need to have Sheikh Muhammad Sharif on your show or something. Like, I am not his public speaker.
I'll just use an example, right? Yeah.
But the guy's got energy.
Right. No, but I think the point is a lot of times people are low like let's be real. Most people are low energy, right? Yeah. Did you say that? Would you agree? Or more than 50%?
I mean, aside from infomercials, I mean.
I think he definitely brought something to the Muslim population that we hadn't seen before. We were very used to mild manner, demeanor, like, oh, I'm so religious and so somber and like spiritual, and that's how I'm going to come off. And so really seeing him be that energetic and enthusiastic, it infused energy into the person that was watching it. But I'd like to kind of like segue a little bit, and now kind of building on, mashallah, all this experience that you have had with life coaching and strategic intervention and all the different Muslim, couples and men and women that you've coached, what do you feel like is one of the biggest issues that people come to you with?
Okay, I know you want to talk about singles, so we'll have to come back to that. We're going to skip to married first. I mean, really, honestly, I think it varies. As many things as you can imagine people come to with. Every couple is unique. Every family system is unique. Interestingly enough, cool fact, right, is that one of the number one things, though, that Muslim women, so this is through my Wives of Jannah organization, will come to me for, is the fact that their husbands are denying them their sexual rights.
What?
I know.
Thank you, Megan, for bringing this up.
Yeah, because it's interesting.
It's impossible. Like, what man would turn a woman down?
That's a great question.
I've been married 9 years.
TMI. All right, so we're going to
like, you know what I'm saying?
No, but I mean, it is really important. No, this is important because we tend to follow this stereotype, right? That men are always just about, sex and intimacy, and women are always feigning headaches. But the interesting thing has been, it's been surprising for me from when I started that this consistently comes up over and over and over and again. And maybe I'm getting those women because of the messages I'm putting out on my Facebook or the stuff that's in my program. It may just be that they feel safe to come to me for that. I don't know. You'd have to do like a cross data analysis of like everyone who works with women. But that has been really interesting for me and I've worked with couples in that situation. And to truth be told with that, there are a lot of reasons why that's happening. One is, you've got men that have been through their own trauma. We think that trauma only affects women in this area, but, it actually affects men too. So you've got men who've experienced some kind of trauma in their life and it impacts their intimate relationship. You've got men that are overly stressed and depressed and anxious and dealing with things like that affects their intimate relationship. You've got... even I've worked with couples where, you have a husband who actually has same-sex attraction and that's come up within the marriage and that's impacting them. You've got pornography addiction and things like that. That's impacting the marriage. There's actually a lot of things that are affecting, couples. But that's one I think that kind of surprises people that really stands out. It's like, what? I always thought it was the other way around. Actually, the conversation is really changing. Another big one is also women feeling, even though their rights are met, quote unquote, they're unsatisfied, they're unhappy. That's a consistent struggle and problem.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that you're bringing that up, because it is a stereotype that I think needs to be challenged. It's unhealthy for us as a community to act like, okay, this is just one way, when clearly it's not. There's so much nuance to it. And I mean, I know that there are men out there who don't even believe female orgasms exist, or that there is any part that a woman needs to be pleasured or whatever during that intimacy. Yeah. And it's just, okay, you know, it's his right that needs to be fulfilled, and that part of it is
because we have this mentality. I think, I mean, I don't know where it comes from, but kind of within the Muslim, I mean, generalizing our own community, we have this mentality that sort of like sex was created for men, and that for women it's just sort of like their job to fulfill it. And it's like, no. Like, you know, it's created for men and women, you know, and everyone's body experiences pleasure. Every part of the human body, actually, every part of the human body experiences some form of pleasure. You know, every part you touch has something that's good for people. So, I mean, even just this mentality, even from the khutbahs and the lectures, there's always this emphasis on the women and these poor men struggling out in this big bad world because they can't control their desires. And it's like, hold on a second. You know, and something I actually bring to that, the side note of the couples, but there's something interesting. As much as men like to talk about their struggles with, you know, visual sexual imagery, which, okay, legitimately, I believe exists. I believe men genuinely have a harder time than women with visual things like that.
Sure.
What's interesting about that is no one ever talks about that if the greatest fitna for men has to do with, let's say, sexual attraction, sexual temptation, let's say like that, right? I say then for women, one of their greatest challenges is emotional need. That there are so many, so if we're going to separate, I'm making a big general stereotype, because by the way, every time you say something, women will message me, that's not true, we're the opposite, that's not true, we're the opposite. I'm always getting the opposites. But that for women, the need to be emotionally connected on a deep level with their intimate partner is huge. And so when women are out, they're working in groups and organizations, and they're online and they're interacting and all these things, and they're coming across men who are kind and nice and take interest in them and, you know, have good manners, that's a huge fitna for women as well. And we don't even pay attention to that. We just always the men. It's like, no. There's a whole world out there where women's needs aren't being met. Maybe, again, there's like the Venn diagram. There's a place where everybody kind of crosses over in the middle, right? But there is a struggle happening on both sides. It's just we tend to focus on only one.
How do you think is a good way for fiancés or people who are interested in getting married to overcome this sexual incompatibility? Because you're seeing that in your couples therapy. It comes up as an issue and as a problem. Right?
You mean like how can singles figure out if they're going to have good sexual chemistry before they're married?
Yes.
That's a big question.
So like, okay.
I always hear this, you try on shoes before you buy them. Like,
Astaghfirullah.
Yeah.
Or test drive a car.
But isn't that like the opposite of what Islam does to honor people?
Actually, I don't. I just order them.
Oh, that's true.
Because I don't have time to try them on. But anyways, no, because here's I want to tell you the reality on the ground from the guy's side. Listen, I know technically we're not supposed to talk about like, you know, our bedroom secrets, but some brothers are so frustrated that, you know, it happens.
I hear from them, by the way.
Right, and I'm sure the sisters community happens too. That there's venting going on, and you just like do it, but when. Like, most of us here sitting here have probably been married close to 10 years or more. Mm-hmm. You know, 15, Naureen, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's, back in the day, I don't remember this issue when we were single discussed as much. Like, the sexual issues once you're married, right? Whereas today's day and age, people who are getting married now, they know about it. It's just more out in the open. And this issues popped up, and so I'll tell brothers who are trying to get married these days, like, make sure you have a sex ed part of your premarital counseling, right? But sometimes people are like, listen, at the end of the day, I just don't know. I just don't know if she's, you know, if I'm going to be able to, like, you know.
Wait, hold on. When you say sex ed as part of your premarital counseling, what exactly do you have in mind?
Like, so where it's covered as part of your sessions, like maybe like
Okay, so I'm going to propose a question because, by the way, I hear from both the husbands too,
right?
And I hear from the single guys,
right?
And alhamdulillah, by the way, one of the reasons I think I hear from men, especially on the Wives of Jannah page, even though it's like for everyone's welcome, right, is because they're like, you're one of the few places that raises women's status as wives without bashing men. Mm-hmm. Like, alhamdulillah, I'm able to keep that honor, that balance. It's really important. You know, we're Muslims. That's the way it's supposed to be. But, you know, you can't ask someone who has never touched a person in their life, so hey, what do you think about this position? Or would you be open to this and that? I mean, how offensive is that? How awful is that? You've never ever experienced anything in your life, and you're what are you going to educate someone on? I mean, aside from, I mean, I think we're in America, okay? We're here in Chicago, whatever. I don't think anyone's not aware of like how sex works or how things are supposed to happen, right? But to be honest with you, I think the reason this is happening is because of the pornography.
Okay.
Because here's why. Typically speaking, although, and this would be more my husband's department with Pure Fire Gaze, it'd be more his expertise. But from my experience with working behind the scenes with this, typically speaking, yes, there are women that access pornography. There are women, and the numbers are growing, right? But primarily, this is a man thing. So what happens is, you know, you've got all these guys who've never had a girlfriend. If they did the halal thing, they lowered their gaze outside, but they're watching people do things that you're never supposed to see in your life unless it's your own spouse, if that.
Right.
And then that becomes a thing. So they spend 8, 9, 10, 15 years, I'm sorry, I'm going to be really blunt, you know, fantasizing about something, and then they're going to get married. And they have trained their mind to like a specific thing or a specific type of female or specific type of look. And then they get married and they're choosing. Now they're stuck. They're like, okay, I want to get married. Of course, mashallah, to someone who's got good deen and character and from a good family and educated and all those things. But what about this?
And
Because
even that fantasy has evolved, right? Because if they've been doing this for so many years,
I mean, I don't know.
doesn't the
but-
stimulus of whatever you watched initially, it doesn't affect you anymore? And
Yeah,
so
I mean, the slippery slope of it all.
Right,
Yeah.
the slippery slope of it all. And then, so the fantasy isn't even building with someone that, okay, you've had this intimate connection with and you're building that sexual relationship with together.
Exactly.
You know, so it's maybe
It's already
in his-
like prepackaged
right,
in your brain.
in his own mind or in her own mind, they've walked through this whole sexual relationship
Exactly.
with nobody.
So-
And
So
Go ahead.
then, yeah, you come to the ground, and and the thing is, guys, well, and a lot of people will say, sorry, ladies, whether you like it or not, you got to know one of the number one reasons a guy gets married is because he wants to be able to be intimate with a woman.
Correct.
And I hate that. And I'll tell you why. I'm like, because again, first of all, one of the number one reasons women wants to get married is what?
Companionship.
And see how we measure out like which one's so much more important than the other, right? Intimacy too. Women want those things too. But at the end of the day, I feel like we frame the whole conversation wrong, which is why we're having these problems. Why aren't we teaching people from the get-go that of course you're looking forward to this, but to help guys see the bigger picture? Because I've literally have single women telling me, especially the ones that are doing all that online matchmaking stuff, you know, that how many guys are asking them, would you be open to certain sexual positions? I'm like, are you serious? Like, what kind of self-respecting man who has any, like, sheer fear of Allah would even ask this question? I'm completely shocked. Like
that's happening? Sorry.
that's happening. And we're talking about Muslims now.
Wow.
Like, that is happening. And it's a thing to the extent I have women saying, is there any guys out there that don't look at pornography? That's one of their
They're
number
actually,
one
so
questions.
I want to
You know?
chime in real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know what the stats are for addiction. I would say 99% of men have seen porn at some point in their lives.
No, but seeing it,
Yeah.
okay, is totally different than consuming it, which is also different from being addicted to it.
Okay, so you're talking 3 levels. Like, I mean, I'll just put this out there. The first time I saw it in 3rd grade, because back then, you know, it would be like some kid at school bring in like Playboy or Penthouse to school, right?
Yeah.
And you're 8 years old. You're not aroused. You're either like, that's really cool, that's gross. That's kind of is like that, and then it sort of pops up. These days now, I want to say I was at work once.
I'm even scared to know.
And a coworker was like, "Hey, check this cartoon, this Aladdin porn out." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he just pulls up on his phone. I'm like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" So now it's on their.
That's like a mother's worst nightmare right now, because you know that, okay, even if you're protecting your children from it, there could be anybody that says, "Hey, check this out" on their phone, and they could literally have anything on it.
You don't even have to say that. You Google like cougar and go to Google Images. Instead of seeing an actual cougar, you see like sexual images of older women.
Yeah, you gotta use safe search.
Or you watch try to watch Urturtle on WLEX, you get some pop-ups.
Oh.
I mean, exactly. So that's why I think it's important. Like, you know, I know my husband does something with at a program where he asks people in the audience, everybody go back and talk about the first time you were exposed to pornography, because everybody has that experience usually, and the reason you remember it is because it's traumatizing. That's not natural to see what you see, whether it's an image or video or a pop. That's not natural. We're not supposed to see those things, right? So it stays in everyone's mind. Everybody can remember that first time, but there's a difference here. What we're talking about is people who are consistently consuming something, and then from there, people that literally they're addicted to something. And I really personally think, I am not a scientist in this area, I don't have any studies, but just even in the 10 years, just looking at how the conversations have changed, whether I'm talking with single people or married people, this comes up over and over and over again. And I don't think it's a problem I think it's only going to get worse. And so that's where we come back to this sex ed. Like, I'm like, what do you want people to talk about? No one, it's, you've never had this experience before. And if you have, for example, someone, mashallah, I tell you something about sisters. They take marriage really seriously. They read books and they take classes and they go to lectures and they take all these notes and they try to prepare themselves to be a good wife who fears, like they do all this stuff. And then for someone to ask them this question and to be reduced that marriage is worth only this thing, we're having the wrong conversation, because what we're not teaching men is the difference between what I call biological sex and intimacy. Mm-hmm. Anybody can have biological sex, but intimacy is so much more rewarding, so much better. But it requires a committed relationship and development for someone to experience that's what's 10 times better than just basically biological release, is how I describe it.
Sure, but at the same time, I think our religiosity has affected, like, there's a prudish nature to sometimes that, even though you don't bring it up.
But I feel like mine, kind of what you're asking is like, oh, with sexual compatibility, let's ask her how much does she like it or whatever. But this is someone who may not have ever experienced it.
Right? No, it's not that. It's like,
either,
let's like, would you be open to your husband performing oral sex on you? Right.
So how can that question be asked whenever someone hasn't ever been intimate?
Are you open to it? It doesn't matter if you haven't had it or not. Are you open to the idea?
No, I
don't think that anyone should ever ask a single question like that ever.
Yeah.
I think that's entirely inappropriate, and it shows an extreme lack of manners.
But why is that? If sex is a part of marriage, we're not saying it's all of it, but there's a part of it, right? And if we ignore that, I don't understand how, because I don't know what is in the Muslim community.
We are not the first race of human beings on this planet.
Right.
How many, thousands of years people have been doing all right? This is a new problem to feel the need to ask. Mm-hmm. It's a new problem. People did not ask these questions in the past. It's a new problem because we have new filters. If people, if we go back 100 years, let's just go back 100 years, right? Now I'll go back 500. Go back in time, right? These questions aren't even on people's minds. Right? So, you might be thinking about what's the first night going to be like or something, right? Mm-hmm. But these questions are a sign of a new disease. That's my personal opinion. And I don't think we should be indulging the new disease. Instead, again, what I think is more important is, do you think you're open to this? Or do you think you'd be willing to do that for someone who's like, oh my God, I never even thought about it yet? The natural state of intimacy is something that people should explore together. If people have a relationship of respect and openness and love, they're naturally going to explore together.
Yeah,
they don't need a question.
My husband and I were very young when we got married. I was 19 and he was just turned 21. He was 20 actually. Turned 21 a couple weeks later. And I find it so beautiful that we were both so innocent and were able to learn together how to be intimate together, because we weren't exposed to, we were too young to be not that I hadn't seen anything or didn't know anything, but these kids that are like, maybe they're getting married later, and so they're trying to release their carnal pleasures in other ways until they aren't able to get married, so then they're spending years looking at porn or reading porn or whatever they're doing, and then they're like, they know, and then they've lost that innocence. It's that purity, like she said, like that we had years ago when they weren't exposed to all these things, is now being lost because of the overexposure.
Well,
I agree. But I think even the development of a sexual relationship happens when the relationship is there first, and I think especially for women, because we're so conditioned and taught to have hayat, you can't now all of a sudden say you're a total stranger to me, and before I even decide whether I want to marry you or have a life with you or have children with you or have this bond with you, first I need to think about this very intimate and almost gross question.
So on that point though, she mentioned something. So do you believe, like, I've thought about this too, is that a lot of, because you talk about first night trauma, do you think there should be a period where there isn't, like, it's kind of like, because even something could be brought up in premarital counseling that there shouldn't, because there is a pressure to have sex on the first night.
Yeah.
Right. I remember back in high school, I was sitting on the couch and I pretended to be asleep, and these like aunties were asking some girl who just got married the night before, like, so how was it? And I was like,
wow.
and back then I was like, me and my friend made a bet. It's like, hey, when they ain't gonna ask us that question, because you know what we'll do? We're like, we just watch TV. So we had like a life. We made it like an oath. on that day. But like, I think that's a problem, is like what Summer was alluding to. Yeah, okay, because you barely, if you're doing it the right way Islamically, you get engaged. A fiance is not a mahram, so you're not going to be like casually like, you know, just chatting, right, for the most part. And then you get married, and then bam.
Yeah, so I mean, I would love it if we had like a group of people that like studied history and like human behavior in this. But here's the way I look at it. So times have changed. So I personally, because of the way generations are and just working with the singles and the married, I'm personally one of those fans of like the whole married but not married thing, where you get married but you're not, you know, you're not living together. You know, like
Like
the whole,
Qatbul Kitab?
I wanted that.
Yeah, I call it the halal dating.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's why. Because, you know, I think if you go back way in time, again, when you bring back that innocence, that lack of information, you know, you only get a little information from someone. I think that whenever people were intimate and whatever worked out for them, I think it was such a different experience for people, I imagine. Two people coming together, knowing very little about each other, you know, and things just happen the way they're supposed to happen, you know, without all the pressure. And I know there's different cultural traditions throughout history and different things that put pressure and all that kind of stuff, but none of that's from Islam, right? There's an encouragement. I mean, I'm not a scholar, you know, there's encouraging things to happen within a reasonable time frame because it solidifies the marriage, but it's not a first night pressure that doesn't actually exist. So I am a fan today, because of all this stuff we're talking about, to give people more time for that natural chemistry to develop, because the reality is everyone's already experienced, you know, sexual attraction and chemistry through middle school and high school and college, even just with, you know, not even dating anyone, right? Just by being with a peer. Everybody's had crushes or like someone. And a lot of Muslims, let's face it, have dated, have been with someone. So I think that giving people a little bit more time to get to know each other so that that natural desire occurs without pressure. But I want to say something. I want to say something really important, and I want to say this to the single men. I think this is important. When the guys are asking this question, whether they're asking the girls about stuff they'd be open to, whether it's about, you know, should we have these conversations? I think that what men need to know is that a real person is better than what's artificial and fake. I think that they are afraid that they're going to get married and spend the $100,000 wedding, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? They're going to jump through all these tubes, basically, and they're really looking forward to this. And I don't think that men should also be shamed for looking forward to being intimate with a woman. This is natural. This is a beautiful thing Allah made permissible for us. I don't think there should be a shame attached to that desire. But I think they also need the assurance that the real thing with a real person, with real intimacy, with a human connection and love and compassion will be far better than, quote unquote, what I basically call a performance. That what comes naturally will be better for them. And I think because the culture doesn't teach men that sex is emotional for them too. It's a spiritual space too. I look at healthy intimacy is, you know, it's physically pleasurable, and it's also an emotional connection, and it's also a spiritual elevation. Those are the three pieces that Islam brings into a relationship. And I think that people need the assurance that it's going to be good and it's going to be okay. It's not going to be perfect, right? But it's going to be something that when two people work, you know, with each other and they're open with each other, inshallah, they're going to get to a place where things are good. And if you don't get to that place, that's where you reach out for help. That's where you talk to somebody. You know, that's where you say, like, you know, we've been trying, it's been a couple, I've worked with a lot of women, they've been married for 2 months, 3 weeks, 6 months, and they've never been able to be intimate. And they've usually got trauma to deal with. They've got stuff in their background, you know, and that's their test. That's something they're going to work through, you know, but I think guys need to know that a real human being that loves you and you love in return and you build is so much better than the fantasy stuff they have been looking at for 10 plus years.
And, you know, I think there is a space for that premarital sex ed kind of counseling or coaching, because in a really informal way, I've had friends and sisters who have come to me, and, you know, I'll know that they got engaged or their marriage is right around the corner. Like, hey, you know, let's grab a cup of chai, come over, let's talk, you know, and kind of opening the floor for questions like, so I'm sure you're familiar
with the questions,
right? I'm sure you're familiar with some of it, but they always have questions, right? There's always like, what's the reality of this situation like? And being able to just kind of walk them through okay, so these are kind of like the myths and the misconceptions that you may have of it. Yeah.
I kind of understood it like the guy and the girl sitting together in the office and someone's like, so, you know, Abdullah and, you know, Sister Amina, please tell me, are you open? I mean, I was like, oh my God, no.
Yeah, that's terrifying.
But that's education. Right. What you're talking about is education. And I think everyone should get educated.
Right. And I know that I've had multiple conversations like that with women, and I know that they feel like they needed that. And I'm wondering if those conversations are happening with young men, right? Their
In a
marriage
wholesome way.
In a wholesome way.
Yeah.
Their marriage is around the corner, and instead of posing questions to their potential fiance or these potential women that they're looking at, is a more experienced, realistic man with adab sitting down and talking to them about this is what intimacy really looks like.
What do you guys think of the Like a
And-
Garment course? Because
Yes,
I
Kadi?
was a guest. They asked me to be a guest speaker for their last launch of that.
Oh, okay.
My piece was called "Will the Angels Curse Me?" Actually.
Oh, I actually
And
don't.
I talked about-
I don't take knowledge from Sheikh Yasser on that issue.
Okay.
He's Aqidah Hadith for me. I don't like his look. He's a 40-year-old Desi dude in a kurta.
Okay, mashallah.
So
So you haven't taken the course.
we bought it. My wife bought it. We just bought it. We're like, it's got lifetime access. We bought it like 5 years ago. Like, we'll get to it at some point.
Well, I mean, just because I mean,
I tell
You're on it now. I feel like now I should check it out, but I was kind of like
I told
on the fence.
I told Sheikh Yasser. It's not. I had lunch with Sheikh Yasser 2 weeks ago, and I told him, I'm not taking like this course from you, dude. It's like Aqidah and Hadith, sure, but not this one.
I see. Well, the point was, I mean, I'm not, defending any part of the course. Just the idea was that they did create the course for that, and I thought that was at least the initiative was for singles married and not to come together and let's talk about everything from perspective. But my piece, my specific piece was about, that's the name of it. I have an ebook, Will the Angels Curse Me? And it was addressing the whole idea that women they never can say no. They don't have any autonomy. They don't have any rights to themselves. So I was addressing it from the position of people that have experienced sexual trauma, actually.
Wow.
So yeah.
So what is the answer? I want to know.
So basically,
I mean, like buy the course.
Yeah, I mean, no. I mean, ultimately, no. I have my ebook is free on my website on the same exact subject line. Ultimately, the message that I've tried to put together is, already women. This is one of their number one questions is like, do we not have a way to ever say no to anything? Like, really? But then, if you've ever been through any kind of sexual trauma, that becomes even more terrifying because once upon a time, you didn't get to say no. So now to think that in the place where you're supposed to be the most loved, most revered, most safe, most cherished, you can't say no. So what happens for a lot of women is that becomes really it's like being re-traumatized over and over again. So the position that, I present in there is that, if you back all the way up and look at who the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was as a person, if you look at our religion overall and what it grants to women and rights and elevation, there's no way that any human being could ever say, I don't care if you're traumatized or not. I don't care if you like this or not. You have to do it anyway. First of all, because if somebody has a husband like that, you don't have to stay married. We're not Catholics. I mean, it's really important to say. I mean, we have this idea like we're Catholics that don't believe in divorce. We're not Catholics. If someone's really mistreating someone, you can leave. And I think people need to hear that. But further to that is, I always reverse the question. What kind of a man would want to harm his wife? How can a man say he fears Allah or he's taking care of her, right? You're obligated to take care of your women. What kind of a person would put his wife in, what kind of a man would even want to be intimate with his wife knowing she's crying or uncomfortable or in pain or not? What kind of a guy is that? And that's someone who, again, isn't understanding the difference between biological sex and actual intimacy. So I argue that yes, she has a right to say no. Because at the end of the day, the thing about, and this is more for the scholars, but the hadith says basically that when the woman denies the man and he spends the night angry with her, that's a really key line. Angry with her. Then the angels will curse her if Allah has decided she's actually sinning. And I go, so what kind of a woman would leave her husband so livid, so angry that he's up the whole night or falls asleep basically in rage because she said no? What kind of a wife would leave her husband like that? I mean, no average couple would talk it out, work it out. I'm so sorry, tomorrow, later, right? Most people would have a conversation. They come to an agreement, right? So to me, I'm looking at two different extremes, right? You either have a woman who is genuinely holding power over a man. She's just respecting him. She doesn't care. She's devaluing his needs, his desires to the extent the guy is angry at her, right? That's a serious thing in a relationship, right? But on the other hand, I say, if a man's going to get so angry at his wife, right, because she can't, be with him, then the other extreme is we're looking at an abusive type of person. And a woman who's with a man who's abusive, I mean, we're in a different category now, right? So she's not going to be punished for saying no because she has to take care of herself. It's going to fall into this person, right? So I can't give fatwa on it, right? But when you think about it from a human perspective, the way people, relationships actually work, we're looking at two different extremes. That's the way I look at it. So it's a reminder to women, don't disrespect your husbands. Don't belittle their desires. Don't belittle their need for you. And on the other side, it's also men don't have just free reign to trample over their wives, treat them like dirt, and not care about their feelings. So I look at it as a very limited piece. So I think it's important. And then taking that with those who have been hurt or traumatized, that they need to know they can say no and take care of themselves.
The one thing that I know when people come to you, right? It's usually sometimes because they probably have issues. If people who are doing great aren't going to come to you, right? So we have to like make that clarification. So that's a certain segment of the population.
Yeah.
With women, how much of it in your experience has been though that like the husband's done all he can do, but it's the woman due to her whatever issue she's got cannot achieve any kind of sexual satisfaction?
Oh, okay, that's a different question. Thought you were going somewhere else with that. No matter how much he tries, she says no.
Yeah, that's
I mean, then he's not done everything that he can do. And she's not done everything she could do. Right? Because unless, I mean, I'm not a doctor now, right? So we're getting,
right.
I mean, this is where I approach it from the coaching side. So unless there's something medically wrong with someone, there's a really great book, actually, I highly recommend. Actually, someone from a friend of mine recommended it. It's called Come As You Are. Can't remember the author's name. You guys could look it up and post it. Fantastic book. And for men and women to read, all about women and satisfaction, how it works from a mental place to a physical place. It was a really fantastic read for me. And she's like, this, like, it resonates with a lot of what I teach, right? So the answer is they haven't done everything. It's as simple as that. He doesn't know what she's into. She doesn't know what she's into. Sometimes the problem for so many people is they're trying to follow like a script in their head, a cultural script. There's a script, right? The way things are supposed to proceed, and then it doesn't work. So the reality is when people are in a place where they don't experience any satisfaction, I actually tell them, look, stop trying to, first of all, a lot of people just focus on intercourse. Like that's it, right? It's like, and they say the majority of women don't even experience orgasm, for example, through intercourse. Okay. How many women even know that? Like, I don't know why all women don't know that. And I don't know why all men don't know that. And I'll tell you why, because pornography, apparently, I've actually never seen this stuff, alhamdulillah, but from everything that I know and I've read and I've studied, I mean, it displays this idea. And so people are already pre-programmed to know that, this is how it's supposed to work, right? So if you know these things and people just do this, so this is where you get to your education model. Now, this is the part where people need to read and to learn. Right. But my whole thing is I tell people, like I said, the whole human body is something that experiences some form of pleasure. So I always tell couples, just don't try to go for the goal. Don't try to make a certain thing happen. Let go of the thing, whatever that it is. Let go of the script. Just enjoy each other. And most of the time, eventually things will work out. But then you've got the education piece. Maybe a husband has no idea what actually makes a woman feel aroused. Maybe he has no idea that for her, she can't feel aroused, for example. It's one of the things the book talks about because her baby is down the hall and she's hearing it coo and that, that wakes her up. Or maybe she's worried about something happening the next day. There's so many facets to people's lives.
So there's a store in the UK that opened. It was like some halal sex toy store, whatever. So what Islamically, like from your perspective, what do you tell? Is that stuff allowed? Like if you're trying to build intimacy or if you're trying to help your wife achieve orgasm or, I'm talking, I don't know, it's like oils or feathers or I don't know, all that stuff. I don't know.
You're getting a little bit out of my league.
I mean, but I'm curious, like, what does Islam have to say about that?
I can't tell you what Islam has to say, but I will say that those are great questions for your scholars. But I mean, as far as like oils and things, I mean, that's kind of like a given. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, one of the things the book had said was that that's one of the number one things most couples are actually missing. Is not enough oils, lubrications, and things like that, specifically for women. She was saying for women, you can almost never have enough. It's almost the problem, I think she said, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm misquoting her, but basically was that it's often not enough. And that's really important for women. So, I mean, I think that's fine.
Before we wrap up here, you became Muslim when you were 19.
Yes.
Do you think that you've had some experiences, because when you converted to Islam, you obviously, I don't know how long it took you to transition as far as like understanding our gender relations. Right? Because obviously before there's pretty much no barrier, right?
Right.
But do you think so? You probably grew up comfortable talking to people of the opposite gender, whereas maybe Muslims growing up, like you mentioned earlier, that guys we it's funny back in high school. You would talk to the non-Muslim girls, but you wouldn't talk to the Muslim girls.
The Muslim girls.
Yeah, like girl with hijab, I can't talk to her.
It's like that even today.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we go to the masjid and everybody kind of like goes their own direction, but then you go back to the office or school and it's like, hey, Betty. It's like, hey, how's it going, Bob? I mean, everybody's because the dynamic forces you to communicate differently, right? So, but yeah, what's your question?
Yeah, so can you comment about like how that experience has maybe helped you or not helped you since in your coaching for marriage?
It's a great question. I actually never thought about whether or not, my background growing up has made me more comfortable in talking. Never even thought about it. If anything, I would say Islam has actually provided a better grounding for how to communicate with the opposite gender. I find the Islamic communication model beautiful. And the best word I always use to describe it is professional interaction. I think the gender interaction model that we have, at least the way I understand it, we're here in North America, so things are different. Where I'm at in Orange County, professional dialogue between brothers and sisters is kind of a common thing. I know there's pockets where that's not so common, but I have actually found that, contrary to maybe the way I grew up, I love the guidelines that Islam provides. Just today, I was sitting in the hotel lobby waiting to get picked up, and I'm listening to the manager train the new girl at, the front desk. And like half the time, I'm like, the guy's just flirting with her. And all I could think, I literally wanted to be like, dude, like, could you be professional? And then like 5 minutes later, he's like, yeah, I mean, my wife. I'm like, what? Their manner of discussion and dialogue just lacked mannerisms. And I think that Islam builds within us a certain, degree of decorum, a certain degree of modesty, which I think is beautiful. I know the pendulum can swing both extremes, right? Where we can't even like be in the same room. And in fact, I remember when I lived in Texas, something that for a long time, I call it like a spiritual one. It really scarred me. I remember this brother was coming into the sister's side to change the light bulb in the ceiling. And we were sitting there and they're like, come on, we have to go. I'm like, where are we going? We have to go into the room, the small little room. I'm like, why? The brother's coming in to change the light bulb. I was like, okay. Like, no, we have to go in the other room because we can't be in here. And I'm like, why? Like, oh, no, we have to go. And then we're all shuffling and getting our stuff and checking up our children and we're hiding in this like tiny room while the guy changes the light bulb. Like, that's not Islam now. And that's going to the pendulum too far. So I think what I've really gained the most is just I appreciate the interaction. But I had never thought about whether or not my upbringing contributes to my comfort level. Yeah,
because I'll mention, so we're both fellow Buckeyes here. I don't know how the MSA was. I assume you...
Oh, you don't even want to know what I did to my MSA. I actually was the one who said... Do you guys really want to hear this?
Sure.
So I call this the convert mistakes. I was the one who advocated that we should have a curtain down the middle. Hold on. And we should sit on the floor and not have chairs because the Prophet ﷺ sat on the ground.
Wow.
And I was also the person that went to Olive Garden and ate with my hands the spaghetti.
So like
the spaghetti. Not even like rotini or something.
Because, and the thing was at that time, I was really sincere. Like I really had a hard time coming into Islam. It was very rocky for a number of years. I was really sincere, but I didn't have anyone to kind of like simmer me down a little bit. Yeah. So, when I look back at that time, I'm like, oh God, like I went from one pendulum extreme to the other completely advocating for these things. And it was only through time that I was able to kind of like get out of that.
That pretty much means your MSA experience was you would have been in line with the old Ohio State MSA, because when we were like that, I remember during elections, the year I got elected, the brother was like, the sisters had a chance to submit their PDFs but they can't speak because we fall on a fatwa now that the woman's voice is aura.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So, you were probably talking about the area, at the Ohio Union, where we used to have the meetings and stuff, the old union.
Probably. It's been so long, but yeah. So I was that person on that side. And
so you laid the groundwork for the aura.
I don't know what happened when I left. Oh my God.
No, we were intense. You know what I mean? It was like... I remember when we wrote the Constitution and made sure that we couldn't have any people of bid'ah or potentially anyone of bid'ah affiliated, etc. You know what I mean?
The conversations have really changed in North America, and I think that we needed the scholars to lead the way on that.
Right.
To make it, again, like I said, a more normal interaction to what's normal to me, right? I mean, other people look at our communities here and they call it free mixing. Yep. So, it's everyone's perspective is different, but that was me back then.
Yeah. So basically, because we were very strict on gender relations too, right? Yeah. I would say we were much more conservative than other MSAs. I'll be honest, I probably only joined the board back in the day because I was like, that's the only way I can actually talk to some girls.
Oh.
Because if you were a non-board member talking to sisters, we had an army of guys that would just chase you home.
So it was that's why they call it the Married Singles Association? Isn't
Right.
that the other acronym for MSA?
Yeah.
And for the record, I didn't meet my wife through MSA, but that didn't really work out. But alhamdulillah, it was a good experience. But Megan, as we wrap up here, how can people find out more about what you're doing, your organization, and maybe your social media presence?
Yeah, sure. So I'm all over the place on social media. So you can find me at wivesofjannah.com or facebook.com/wivesofjannah. And then my other page is probably you'd find it under Coach Megan Wyatt, not White, just so we get it clear. It's Wyatt, Wyatt, under the Passionate Imperfectionist.
That's like Wyatt Earp, Wyatt.
No, because everyone always says introducing Megan White, and my joke for like 10 years is I'm white, but my last name is Wyatt. Thank you, and it's been consistent. But yeah, so it's either the sphere of like relationships, and then the other side of it, I call it kind of like my personal development space within Islamic Filter, where we do group coaching programs and things for people like maybe not you. No, but yeah, I mean, alhamdulillah. So 2 places there. So passionateimperfectionist.com or website.
Very cool. And we mentioned your husband's porn coaching kind of stuff. Why don't you put a quick plug in for him real quick?
Recovery.
Recovery?
The word recovery after that. Yeah, sure. So my husband's Wyatt Ramadan's the founder of Purify Your Gaze. And it's basically a website dedicated completely to Muslims that are struggling with porn addiction, sex addiction. It's honestly a very beautiful organization. It has a training program. It has weekly, online calls, accountability buddies. There's also a therapist on board. It's forums. I mean, it's a really beautiful place for people to come where they can remove their mask and get the genuine help they need.
All right. Well, Jazakallah khair. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook, like us on follow us on Twitter. We're on Instagram. Give us a 5-star review on iTunes. Can I get an OH out of you? No? OH?
I-O.
And for our special guest, Coach Megan Wyatt, and my co-host Summer and Naureen, this is Mahin signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.
I haven't done football in so long.